The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Roland was born into a German Lutheran family in 1935. During the 1940s, the family lived in Cottage City, Maryland, USA. According to Allen, Roland was an only child and depended upon adults in his household for playmates. Primarily his Aunt Harriet, who was beloved to him, and she was very close with him. His Aunt Harriet, who was a spiritualist, introduced Roland to the Ouija board when he expressed interest in it, and he too developed a fascination with it. Harriet taught Roland how to use an Ouija board to contact the other side. Harriet died in the summer of 1948. She died very suddenly, and Roland was very deeply saddened. Roland then used the Ouija board to contact Harriet on the other side. He placed it on the nearby table and attempted to communicate with her once again. But no movement came from the board. But then, shortly after the death of Harriet, and shortly after Roland tried to use the Ouija board, some strange events began to happen. In January 1949, the paranormal events started occurring. The feeling of unease settled in the family house. Reported hearing strange dripping, in which after a week the family contacted a plumber who went to take a look at the pipes and found no evidence of any pipes being damaged. But then the drips turned into thumping sounds and then scratching sounds, seemingly coming from inside the walls of the house, in which mice were suspected by the family, so they contacted for an exterminator to come. But no evidence of any infestation was found either, and things escalated for the next few months. Furniture moving by itself, pictures of Jesus started rattling and shaking as it was being hit from behind, items hauled across rooms by invisible forces. Things kept getting more and more and more intense. The forces then came to Roland's bedroom and to his bed, and then one night Roland was awakened by his bed violently shaking, and he screamed and cried for his mother to tend to him. As his mother ran into his bedroom, she was terrified to see, in shock, that his bed was thumping all by itself. Roland was brought to a doctor, was admitted to a hospital where a psychiatrist attempted to treat him. Both the doctor and the psychiatrist said he was very stressed out but was in good health. but was ultimately unsuccessful, and the psychiatrist, not knowing what else to do, the family called the minister, and after observing the boy overnight at church, the minister suggested to reach out to Jesuits. The family converted to Catholicism and tried to have Roland baptized. But the boy responded to their baptism attempts with unbridled rage. Roland kept being taunted by the forces every day. At first, Roland's mother believed the haunting noise was connected to his dead aunt. So the family started trying to reach out to the spirits they believed to be in the house, hoping they could reason with them, and asked to be left alone. However, this only made things worse. Roland claimed he could hear someone walking in his room at night when he was trying to sleep, and there were scratch marks found on his mattress in the morning. Eventually, scratch marks began also appearing on his body, in which the first spelt out Bowden. The family used Harriet's Ouija board to see if they could contact her. The board interacted with them. It obliged by throwing a chair across the living room. Then the next day, on Roland's legs were burning welts, and then the word was spelt St. Louis, and then became suspicious that demons had gotten into him. They contacted a pastor who came to the house and saw both markings on Roland, and he suggested to contact the Catholic Church. Instead, they left thinking the demonic activity would stay at the house. They relocated to St. Louis, Missouri, USA. But the activity followed. So they reached a priest named Father William Bowden, in whose name was marked on Roland. Bowden was not convinced the boy was possessed, but wanted to help out what was going on, and made an agreement to say prayers over the boy. He came joined by fellow priests named Father Raymond Bishop. As they said their first prayers, Roland began to absolutely scream. He was also yelling in terrible agony that his chest was burning. They opened his shirt and saw, to their horror, red cuts appeared in his skin. So the priest began to pray more than 7 hours, lasting from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then Roland fell into a coma-like state at one point, Bowden attempted to protect Roland through blessings by putting a crucifix under the young boy's pillow. The priest decided to convene among themselves on how things would be more forward and how they should assist Roland. Father Bowden and Father Bishop came back to the house and made a decision to perform an exorcism, and an Archbishop of St. Louis to ask to be given permission to the exorcism. It was granted only if he provides account day to day with the church, and in return agreed to do so. After a week, Father Bowden and Father Bishop came back to the house and came to Roland's freezing bedroom to perform the exorcism, in which Roland's father came to help subdue him, as Roland was very violently acting out. But however, he gained strength that would not be like boys his age to have, in which he punched Father Bishop in the face and broke his nose. And managing to break loose from his father too, but was still subduing him. After the first night, Roland went unconscious, and so the priests thought the prayers were working. But after they left, Roland began to really yell, roar and scream like a monster, and it lasted hours. The priests were contacted, and they returned very quickly and resumed the ritual, this time with both priests and both of Roland's parents. 4 hours Roland screamed and contorted. Roland asked for the nearest window to be opened, and his mother did open the window, and Roland vomited what looked like thick black substance. Roland looked normal again, and they all knelt down and thanked God, and they thought it was all over. But however, sometimes in an exorcism, the devil does leave the possessed in peace to make it look like he has left the body. So they must see through to realize this can be a trap. Roland is peacefully resting again, and the family think it's all fine again. But at 2 a.m, an eerie, uneasy quiet comes. Then Roland again screams an earthquaking, thundering roar again. Very deep guttural screams. Roland's parents again call the priest, and yet again arrive around 3:15 a.m. and came back to Roland's bedside. Around 6 a.m, Roland is in a catastrophic frozen like a statue, lying on his back with his eyes wide open and his arms and legs in the air. I know it's catastrophic, sorry. Just a bit tired. the priest decided not to leave the house as they want to listen out in case things happen again. Around 8:30 a.m. bizarre activity resumes as Roland screams. Knocking sounds happen and he barked in multiple octaves. There were vases flying and there was objects levitating, and Roland was just talking in a very guttural voice. So he was sent away to a worthy place where the exorcism could continue at a sanctified place where calling for God to intervene. For both men, it is most intense possession they said to have ever come across. He was sent to a hospital ran by Catholic monks. Roland was laced in a private room on the private floor to protect him and protect the other patients from being scared. Father Bowden and Father Bishop came to the hospital with another priest named Father Walter Alleran, who was asked to restrain Roland during the prayers and visit while Roland was calm and keep his spirits up. Father Alleran visited Roland a lot and blessed him with a small vial of holy water and put the vial on the dresser next to his bed. But then after a few seconds, the vial flew across the room and smashed into a wall. As they knew they could not give up and knew there was no choice but to perform the exorcism yet again, Roland then began screaming like a demon again and telltale signs of possession began to escalate. And Roland knew that Father Alleran's mother had only died not long ago, which could not be possible as Roland and Alleran had only met for the first time. He looked at Father Alleran in a very sinister, evil, smiling way. He says, "Your mother says hello. She's rotting in the depths of hell," which was very scary and angering for the priest. Prayers kept going and going till Roland went catatonic. Then all three priests and Roland's father came to the hospital. And by now, Roland was hugely violent and all four men had a hard time holding him. Not only multiple voices and impossible strength, he began spitting a foul-smelling liquid at them too. And as the day went on, Roland claimed Father Alleran was trying to hurt him while restraining him. As Alleran loosened his grip, Roland punched him in the face and left him in a bloody mess. For that day then concluded, there was no sign of progress and things were exhausting and draining, but they needed to come to a conclusion despite no signs of things getting better. The ritual still had to go on, even with Roland becoming more violent, angry, and he urinated on the floor. More objects moved more regularly, and on day 18 at the hospital, he asked the priest for a pen and paper. And he wrote on it, "I am the devil himself, and within 10 days I will give you a sign." Just after writing the letter, he screamed, and Roman numeral 10 carves into the skin on Roland's chest. So right after Father Bowden decides to baptize Roland in help that he will crusade the demons that plagued him, the next day Roland gave permission and Father Bowden began the baptism, which calmed Roland, but was short-lived. After 10 minutes, fits of anger returned and kept doing so night after night, with the prayers going on and on and on. Roland is still overwhelmed. Then Roland screamed with a word carved into his chest, "Exit," in capital letters, and the horrified priest continued with the prayers. Now the devil is talking through Roland's body and says, "You need to say one more word, but you never say it." At the end of the session, the priests were puzzled on what that saying could have meant. So they read through the book on exorcism. They realized Father Bowden was forgetting to read the word Lord all the time and time again. Frightened further, but affirmed their suspicions too. Then the next day it was a cold as ice, rainy night. As the priests arrived, they sensed something was not right. The lights in Roland's room were flickering on and off, but in different rooms too. So they checked in at the front desk, and the clerk began to cry and tried tearfully to say things were so bad she was so terrified. As the priest came to Roland's room, they smelt a very strong sulphuric smell from inside. As they entered Roland's room, he began cursing at them in fluent Latin, in which Roland never knew Latin. As the ritual began that night, Roland stated this was their sign. So Father Bowden began to command the spirit to prove itself to him. As it was said, the boy gave the evil smile and touched the priest's purple vestment. They then burst into hundreds of individual fibers. Now it was time to pray harder than ever before. During this ritual battle, Roland broke his bedside and tried to stab Father Bowden with it. But Roland was restrained and failed to do so. Roland then thrashed the place, urinated on the floor, threatened and screamed in dual octaves. 5 hours in, he started a new frightening behaviour. Roland tilted back his head and slowly floated up to the ceiling. Before reaching the ceiling, the men grabbed him and brought him back down and put new restraints on him. After 7 hours of fighting, Roland gasped and exclaimed, saying he saw Saint Michael the Archangel using his flaming sword to fight the devil and drive him away. He drove him back to the dark abyss. Roland then fell silent and finally closed his eyes and fell asleep. After the long night and long 28 days were finally made worth it, Roland slowly returned to being back to his normal self and went on to live a normal life. He died aged 84 on the 10th of May 2020. Years after the exorcism case, a man named William Peter Blatty heard about the demonic case and got interested and reached out to the priest to talk about it. He asked, was it real or not? In which Father Bowden, who got back to William Peter Blatty, said, I had no doubt about it then, and I have no doubt about it now, that what was in that room that night was the otherworldly source we call the devil in the flesh. William Peter Blatty took the case as an inspiration and he wrote a book titled The Exorcist. The book was released in 1971. Then, 2 years later, in 1973, it was made into a worldwide classic movie in which William Peter Blatty was screenwriter and producer for it. It was directed by William Friedkin and starred Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Linda Blair, Jason Miller, and it was the first horror movie to be nominated an Academy Award for Best Picture. Only in The Exorcist, it's a young 12-year-old girl named Regan McNeil who played with a Ouija board and spoke with a spirit she called Captain Audi. And then she starts going. Chris McNeil, her mother, who was played by Ellen Burstyn. Regan was played by Linda Blair. Intensity started to happen. Then first she gets treated for psychiatrists, but then they realise she's possessed, so then she contacts a priest, which one of them was Damien Karras, who was played by Jason Miller, and then came Lancaster Marin, Father Lancaster Marin, played by Max von Sydow, and they do the exorcism on Regan. So, the Exorcism of Roland Doe is actually the case that inspired The Exorcist, the book and the movie. So, this video was talking about the real life Exorcist. I hope you enjoyed this blog and, vlog. Sorry, I'm really tired at the moment. I had a long day trying to type all this out, but I really hope you enjoyed this vlog, and I will have many more to do.